who all is attending KubeCon? Curious.
I am.
Adina, you are?
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
I missed the talk from Ashley from yesterday from All Day DevOps. I could not stay much more online. It was a week with a lot of conferences this week. I don't know what is happening, but there are so many in the same time. It was the Digital Ocean one, the one from InfluxDB, uh, something from Tigera, KubeCon next week, and All Day DevOps also. So,
yeah, and then AWS reInvent has happened.
yeah, I didn't even click it anymore. No, it was too much. It's like I don't know. It's like virus. It's too much. There's too many in the same time.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, totally. Yeah, reInvent is coming up, and it'll be 3 weeks long.
What?
Yeah, that's just what everybody needs. 3 weeks of AWS shoved into your mouth. All right, fair enough.
If you have a tip, like okay, you can go on these talks or something like that, a short thing, but yeah.
Yeah. No, I think most of them will be recorded and published as well. That's a change for them. Very good. Well, if you're, so by the way, talking about KubeCon, there's going to be, there was going to be 4 talks about Meshery, SMP, and SMI conformance. It's just, too much, I think, for the collection of us. So we moved it back to 3 talks, but there'll be 3 talks next week that highlight the works that are being done here. And I think that there are links. I think there are probably links to them in older meeting minutes, but you should all, you don't all have to attend or have to, but you should all minimally take pride in the fact that your works are out there. Pretty neat. I was just on an advisory board call with Cisco this last hour, hence the lack of prep in the meeting minutes. But I'll say that it isn't without, it's within reason that things like SMP in particular and Meshery actually are of interest to Cisco in those conversations. So it's good. Who has a call for topics? If you've got topics or questions or things, toss them in. If you don't, Shridi is, I think, going to list out some newcomers in the community that joined this last week. We've got a few of them. And actually, I don't know that we have any newcomers on the call right now. That's probably because the newcomers call on Thursday is doing a pretty good job. There were a few of them on yesterday's call. So there's some things to chat on. Kush, you're here. You had a topic this last Wednesday on AKS. I think we covered it, but do you want to give people a quick update who might not have been on that call?
Sure. I'm just seeing if I have a working demo of Meshery running, so I can demo the command right now. It will just take me another 1 minute to check.
So curious, Dhruv, did your name go up on the schedule? Are you a KubeCon speaker at this point? Or are they not listing the names? Okay, they're not listing the names, but all right. But here's one of the places where we'll be discussing the work. Drew, if you could, I'm gonna put your name down here to talk about SMI conformance some and the table on the landscape.
So I guess we are good to go. I don't have Mishri on local, but at least I can show you the cube config getting feds and stored in the temporary location, which we are using for provisioning the system command in the Mishri CTL. My screen is visible.
Yep.
Okay, so it was the following PR which added the support for AKS. We are provisioning AKS using simple method through Azure CLI. What we are doing is we have a simple bash script which takes the resource group in the cluster name, and then it gets the credential file and it places the credential file in the target folder, which we have already specified in the scripts above. And then the following config is being passed to the Meshri CTL utils, where we have get context and list context in case if you have multiple services running in a same list. So let's see it in the action. So I have a local build of Meshri CTL on my local. I have provided system config AKS and the token path, which will be used at the authentication for the Meshri. So first this will ask for the resource group. What's the cluster name? Then it will check if you have Azure CLI present, and then it will show you, okay, so our
Uh,
cluster name has been
could
merged. Mhm.
Sorry to interrupt, but actually, as people go to give feedback, it would be good if can you do a poll on the can you switch to master because I think because this got merged and I tossed in a few updates as I did that, just some user experience updates. If you can, yeah. One thing that I didn't do is remove the output that we're giving about, I think the Azure CLI version, which for my part, I consider unnecessary. Like that, hey, if we discover it and are able to interact with it, that's good. And the user, we don't need to show them that.
So we are on the latest master now, and
There you
okay,
go.
so now it detects the Azure CLI at first, and then it asks you to enter the resource group name, then the cluster name.
Actually, yeah, a couple of things on this, because actually, like, part of the, I don't mean to interrupt your presentation, but just I want to make sure that so everyone that's on this call today is a Meshri contributor, an SMP, are contributing and contributing code, and each of you are designing the experiences and going through. And I want to walk through this a little bit to say that the initial experience of kind of giving people output that there's that JSON that we're showing would be if at some point we ever had a verbose flag for Meshri CTL, we could include, debug like that, but we would otherwise just say configuring Meshri access to AKS, and the ... is important because we're indicating to them that this is a process and a procedure, and that the colon at the end of the line, and we're giving them we're not asking a question, so we don't have a question mark, but we're giving them an instruction in this case, and it's we're using direct language. Please enter the Azure resource group, colon. Now we are asking for the input on a new line, and for me, it's most intuitive as a user if I'm entering it on the same line. This is just a super small nit, but like ideally, from my
What I say over here is that we can include the resource name and cluster name in the Meshri CTL system config as well, rather than asking at the runtime.
shoot,
That would
yeah,
be more better user experience, in my opinion.
Yeah, for people who are savvy, who already know that like this is the requirement that you need to provide arguments that have this. For people that aren't like this is not this is pretty good. Like it is the same experience that you'll have with the AWS CLI or the AKS CLI, that when you go to interact with those for the first time, they'll ask you some questions as well. And so it's but supporting both is what I'm saying, is like ideally, like the flags are particularly like required and necessary to the extent that we would desire for people to be able to script around Mesh-free CTL, because without that, it would be more difficult for them to script inputs. One thing I tossed in, and I don't know, this is just this was a thought at the time, was before, if you were not to enter in a name, it would exit the process would exit, and it would give you the standard out error, or not the standard out error, it would give you the standard error, which I removed, and like because we don't need to tell them these things. So actually what I did here is, not only did I remove I left in that ugly error, unexpected new line, but I changed it to let them try it again. So at least one time we just said error reading the cluster name, unexpected new line. And actually I think that's still a little confusing, but what we say is, let's try again, please enter the AKS. And in this case, like it's wrong, there's a bug. It should say, please enter the AKS resource name, which is the first question that, but my point is, I wanted to kind of talk out loud with folks to let think through the user experience here. I'll take some notes, because I think, Kush, what you'd suggested about the supporting command line, the arguments, that makes a ton of sense. But I'm trying to open up discussion, dialogue, if people think of this differently. The other item, and Kush, I think you're aligned, your thinking is aligned with this, is that that we would ideally not create a temporary entry in a file system, but
Yeah.
rather
Use it in the .mesh folder, I guess.
yeah, if we need to, so two things, like, yes, if we need to write something to disk, that we would use the hidden .meshry folder in the user's home directory. But also, I think there's an argument to be made that says, hey, we actually, at least mid-flight, while we're manipulating the config, and maybe I'm mistaken, like I thought that we were writing to disk temporarily to do something, and then we were writing to disk again somewhere else, or was the experience that we were writing to that temporary location and the user was expected to go pick up that config from the temp location? But yeah, I guess that's a question. Like, of the file that you're writing to the temp location, is the user expected to go retrieve that?
Nope.
Okay. And we weren't, I don't know that we were deleting it, but probably we should.
We are not deleting it.
And so it was just a temporary holding position spot for things that we were processing. When we were done here, we would have generated a kube config and put it into a different location, or what?
So what we do is we put the kube config in a in the temporary location. And once the kube config is there, we pass the kube config location as the temporary location, from where Mesh-free gets the context and lists the context and selects the context.
Oh, okay. Okay. So yeah, if you're moving the location to the app folder, that makes sense. And so we'll write out the flag. Again, like I apologize, I didn't see all of I only made it sort of halfway through all of what this is, but when you have that new file that has the right certificate information for Mesh-free to be able to connect to AKS, were you using the --? the global flag -- config.
Global flag dash config.
Yeah, or at the end, how were you passing that new kube config to Mesh CTL?
The following command does the all the stuff.
Yeah, and that's what I'm asking. Like at the end of that script, at the end of the sequence of
Yep.
logic.
So once the script is done, the script sends the success message, and the program knows that this is the location where the kube config has been placed, and then get context function is invoked. What it do is it just fetches the kube config from this location and lists out the contexts which are available, and then set context is invoked, which lists the context and ask you which context you want to set for Mishri, and then then it makes a put. I guess it's a put request to Mishri API to select the following context.
Okay. Yeah. So that makes sense. If we're just moving the location, then the rest of the experience sounds right. There is, and I don't know if there's anyone on this call that is potentially more knowledgeable on Kubernetes and an alternative approach that we could be taking to for Meshri to be communicating with Kube API. So as opposed to sourcing that from kube configs, I think there's potentially other approaches. And I don't know that any of them are nearly as convenient to the user. Yeah. Yeah. So Anirudh, I know that.
I think Terraform also has.
Say it again, Adina.
You can do it with Terraform and specify that is Azure. I think you can have it. For sure it is. So
Cool. Okay. Yeah. You can also use a bearer token instead of a config, but yeah, those aren't as okay. Never mind. Yes. So moving on. Nice. And so then we also need this for EKS, this type of experience. And so, by the way, soon we'll need the ability for Meshri CTL to provision Meshri itself into the cluster.
Deploying Meshri into the cluster?
Yeah. As opposed to asking people to take manifest, either use Helm or take manifest to go deploy Meshri, that we'll still offer that as an option, but that we would be able to provide a better experience by using, instead of Meshri CTL system start, that assumes that you're going to deploy locally to Docker, there would be another flag, or there would be a question that's asked after that that says, oh, did you want to do it locally, or did you want to do it to a Kubernetes environment?
Having a flag would be good, like Meshri CTL configs, system start, dash Kubernetes or whatever. Then it can see what's the context you are working on and deploy it to the same kubectl context.
Yeah.
That would be pretty neat, I guess.
Yeah. It's actually egregiously missing. There's been an open issue on it for a while. A few people brought it up, and really I think that the primary reason why that hasn't gone forth is just about a design spec that gives holistic thought to what we've talked about in the past, to profiles and contexts, like bringing forth if you're familiar, you used kubeconfig, if you've used kubectl, you can go over and do kubectl context, and you can work with your context, set contexts and switch them and things. It's that kind of a similar thing that's needed for Mesh CTL. We need to bring in the notion of a context, and then that will help. One, it'll be more powerful to be able to manage your multiple clusters and where you want Meshry to connect to. But two, it will also avoid long command line arguments of saying dash dash Kubernetes, but like which Kubernetes did you mean? And then beyond that, which, like which namespace did you mean and stuff like that. So yeah, that's, yeah, this is exactly kind of some of the initial thoughts. This was back when, if you see that in the comment, it says, if you go back for a second, Kush, in the comment, it says Meshry CTL start -P, like for platform. It's in the middle of the, yeah, -P for platform. You could say Docker, you could say Kubernetes, but then like, anyway, I think we spent more time kind of talking about doing this, talking about creating a design than we have doing the design. Anirudh, did you take a crack at this before, this particular area?
No.
Okay.
I was working on the mesh commands. I didn't get into context because by the time I decided to move on from H3CTL, context and profiles is still pretty new.
Okay. Okay. Anyway, so I'm kind of digressing as to a whole other set of conversations, but yeah, so so Husseina is looking at supporting Meshry CTL system config EKS, which is good. And I think that it's relatively straightforward to support that when you're running Meshry outside of EKS, when you're running Meshry locally. It's a very similar set of things that you need to do for EKS. I think for EKS, the story gets a lot more complex when you deploy Meshry or any app inside of EKS. My understanding from Abhishek is that if you want to integrate with IAM, then you've got to be running an AWS authenticator, like another container, and it gets more complex. So if anybody has experience there or interest there, please see Husseina, because she's working on that. Kush, thank you for sharing. It's good. Any other comments for Kush? Look at this. Kush, do you mind adding the notes about parameters or arguments?
Sure.
Thank you. Drew, let's talk about the SMI conformance and the table on the landscape.
Yeah, sure. Let me.
And
Okay. Oh, can you see my screen?
yep.
Okay, so for the people who are not don't know what our efforts are regarding SMI, SMI is basically an interface with certain specifications that they have defined for to generalize the capability of a service mesh, right? So for seeing whether a particular service mesh is compliant or not, we are defining certain set of test cases for each of the spec which they are defined. And these are currently ongoing work. And yeah, so basically we run those tests to see whether they are compliant or not. And based on how many tests they pass, we also define how much capable they are, whether they pass half of the test, whether they pass full of the test, or they don't pass the test at all. Okay? So that is how we define whether a service mesh is conformant to that particular SMI specs. And
Yeah, so that is SMI in nutshell. And what we are doing right now is uh, currently there are two things which we want to do regarding SMI specs. One would be to run your test on your local mesh or your mesh itself to see whether it is SMI compliant or conformant or not. And you can currently do that using adapters in Meshri itself. Like I don't have it deployed, so I will just show a screenshot quickly. So yeah, so this function is right now you can do it properly, and this is well to go. If you find any bugs, then please tell us. And except that, we also wanted to update the service mesh landscape which we have currently, right? This is basically telling whether a particular service mesh is SMI. Over here, it is SMI compliant or not, right? So what we have in mind is each service mesh provider will have their own will have integrated Meshri CTL in their CI/CD pipeline, in which uh, they will run this test, and those particular tests we would save in our Meshri cloud, and we will use them to show a more detailed table data of how much compliant is it or is it not. So right now we are working on that particular capability, and in the landscape, this is the current layout of the table which we are thinking. And so this is in a prototype stage. Don't mind the alignment and small things like that. We can like discuss about the structure of the tables itself. That currently, if we click on a particular mesh, we would see the previous version of that particular mesh and whether they were uh, conformant to that particular spec or not. And currently, this is just the data which we have filled up manually. These are not the tests which we had done, which will be updated. And yeah, like we have an idea that the tooltip will have more data about why they are passing or why they are not passing and stuff like that. So yeah, any comments on the table? Was I mute?
No. I was going to say something. So there's the next SMI meeting. The SMI meetings happen twice a month. The next one, we weren't going to have another one this year, but we changed that and put one in for not this coming Wednesday, because that's kind of a week of KubeCon, but the following Wednesday. So I think it's the 25th. On that Wednesday, that meeting is dedicated to anyone who's participating in SMI. It's dedicated to discussing SMI conformance. It's to this initiative, which is
So
great. It's great that this will be here by.
yeah, you were saying?
Sorry, yeah, no, I didn't know I was speaking over you.
No, I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, just letting everyone know in 2 weeks, the Wednesday, the 25th, we'll have an SMI meeting that is dedicated to SMI conformance. And so good for, open to anyone that wants to attend, but good for us to get this table up to help people understand what part of the goal is. This table intentionally is only so detailed for two reasons. One, because not all of the result set is being that Meshri collects. It's not all being sent to the remote provider yet for presentation. That's one reason. And then the second reason is because by the time that we're done with defining all of these tests, it'll be quite a few. And so, I'm not sure if all of that level, I don't know, we'll see. I'm not sure if all of that level of detail is necessary here in a landscape like this. It's quite expected. I certainly anticipate that these results will be shown on meshri.io here on the landscape, but they'll probably also be shown on SMI spec.io.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, as it turns out, we've been getting more and more into SMI. So the Meet the Maintainers is something that I had organized so that we can go tell people about SMI, but also about SMI conformance. And so there'll be a few other SMI maintainers that will join that session, which reminds me, I have an action item to go create a few slides so that we can have them in the background as people come to that session. Drew, were you able to take a look yet at some of the mobile friendly issues on the table?
Not yet. I was planning on doing it today. So yeah, I will
Sounds good.
update you later on that.
Sounds good. Drew, the Istio SVG, I think that's being used, it has a white background to it. There's a curated set, and actually that app mesh, is that a PNG or an SVG? Do you remember?
That
The bottom,
should be a SVG.
Nice, or the bottom one.
Which one?
Yep, the very last one. So anyway, there's a curated set of all of them are SVGs, and all of them, yeah. So all of them are SVGs, and all of them have been like trimmed, like you were saying. There's the same two sets of those. There's one in the Meshery docs for the adapters, and then there's another one in meshery.io. So you can go grab a copy of those from one of those two repos.
So, all of them are properly, they don't have white spaces. That's what you're telling me.
Yeah, they all don't have white space, and they're all SVG as well, which is great because.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been
from where?
Either the meshery.io repo, or Meshery repo in the docs section.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that.
Yeah. Oh, one thing too is Gerald had, I think in his CSS updates, had removed the padding in the tables up above, and that
I found the reason of why it was happening, but it was because we were using like different CSS and JavaScript version all together for this. So it was overlapping with the CSS we were using already. So that's why it was screwing it all up. So yeah.
Cool. Nice. Thank you, Drew. Really important. I was just showing this to a principal engineer at HPE yesterday. And then having to apologize because it's like, it's incomplete. So good.
If you want to run a test on Meshery, it is complete.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. As a matter of fact, your work is being held up by the lack of persistence of the test results to a remote provider. So, yeah, I want to get past this particular thing. Like it's really good for Meshery. It's helpful for people to recognize Meshery as like a source of authority for SMI, a source of authority for SMP. But in terms of like the layman or the core persona that we're targeting with Meshery, very, very few of them are going to care. And so consequently, we only want to invest, or we want to get it behind us. Unfortunately, it's going to take longer than I had hoped. It's going to take longer because as we go to engage with each individual service mesh team, they're going to want to define the test. We don't need to be in a position to define all the tests. So Nginx, the Nginx open source engineer for Nginx Service Mesh was on this last SMI call, and I'll be reaching out to him to make sure that he understands this initiative and that we can get up and going with them. And maybe they'll be one of the first. That said, we have to make sure the Nginx adapter works, and it doesn't just yet.
So they're going to contribute in adding the test cases. Is that so?
Yeah, that's it. Yep, we've had a call out. Yeah, exactly. We need to go be bullies about that because we've been asking and asking, and we need to go twist some arms. So,
Mm.
so bring your brass knuckles. Cool. All right. Any other feedback or discussion on SMI?
Yes, if I may, about SMI, my comment in document. So maybe it's sort of like in the SMI, or my question in the SMI document that we looked at as well. Our setup, is it sort of like the intention also of SMI or of Measury, that we can use the same Layer5 Learn, what's it called, application and deployment descriptor, and run it on all service meshes without the possibility to
Yeah.
do some service mesh specific configurations, or is it just because, is that the intention or the purpose, if you like, of SMI or of the setup, or is it just because this is sort of like the first?
For context, really quickly.
Yeah.
In order for, like, as part of this SMI conformance, in order for Measury to verify that a given service mesh adheres to the specifications, it needs to run tests and define assertions and verify them. And in the process of doing that, Measury needs to, and this is why Measury is being used, because it needs to stand up any number of different service meshes, deploy a sample application, generate load, verify that things are behaving as they should. And so to what Michael is pointing out is like, well, when you deploy a sample app onto one mesh, it needs annotated in different ways. It needs labeled in different ways. You know, the one onboarding procedure for one mesh isn't necessarily the same for another. And so to facilitate part of to facilitate the testing of SMI conformance, a new sample app was created, a relatively simple one that's instrumented, a relatively lightweight and simple one that we can use that is also instrumented for receiving some metrics and to verify things with the traffic metric spec and things like that. In process of creating the sample app though, it does need to be, its manifest, its deployment needs to be compatible with each and every mesh, and they do it differently. So Michael's pointing out that for console, part of their configuration is part of the configuration of services running on a console service mesh needs to have particular annotations. So Michael, right now, I'm going to fumble for a moment to find the right file, but there is a portion of what we're doing here that is a case statement. There's a portion of what we're doing that takes into consideration that different service meshes need different annotations. And inside of this, conformance, client go, this could be it. No. This is it. Okay, so there's a SMI conformance. So this is the sample app. Learn Layer5 is the name of it. The sample app is used for a few different things. It's intended to help people learn about service meshes and so, and be used for validation here. So part of how it's interacted with is when the test is run, and I guess this needs to be updated or more thought needs to be given, but there's a simple switch statement that says, well, if you're going to run this test with Linkerd, then here are the required annotations that need to be assigned to, and I don't know if the context is a pod, a deployment, or a namespace.
I think the labels are on the namespace actually. I can't remember, but I think the label is on the namespace, and also the examples I was looking at, the open service mesh in the code, in the validate command in the OSM adapter, the mesh, you can send in the mesh name as a parameter to the, the run test function, and it's not OSM, so so this case statement isn't picked up, if you like. So I was also a bit confused because I saw this case statement. But I think in case of OSM, it's actually not executed. It's not going through this case statement because
yeah, that's right. So this this whole there's part of the architecture of what we're doing for performing this testing that doesn't sit well in general. And what's going on here is that we had early on considered that we would like to use Kudo, an open source project, to help us perform assertions and verify assertions in a Kubernetes-centric environment. And so Kudo's methodology is more or less for you to give it a set of manifests that you'd like for it to provision in a separate namespace. And so that's why there's a little bit of a disconnect between what the adapter, so I don't believe that it's the OSM adapter that is spinning up the instance of OSM. Unless I'm confused.
No, I think you have to do that before, possibly, yourself.
I have to go look. But to your point, like there's a, you're able to specify annotations and service mesh specific needs in different areas. Yeah, I have to go look because the user experience in Meshery is such that yeah, I don't know. I've been too far removed from it. I guess I couldn't speak concisely on it. But yeah, so Michael, I don't know if that helps you any, get any further.
No, the way I understood, and when I was debugging this, I thought that it was this Kudo manifests that were used to install the sample application. That was my understanding, and they are actually defined in Meshkit, aren't they?
I couldn't say it now.
No, but the sort of like maybe the sort of the general question is the learn layer 5 sample application in the context of SMI and maybe also of SMP. If the service mesh specific deployment, and that can be a variety of things, I imagine, service accounts, and maybe you would like to, and that's another question, would you like to test with different configurations as well, ACL enabled, stuff like this? Would it be sort of like possible to inject the deployment manifest for the sample application specific to a specific service mesh if it deviates from the sort of like the vanilla or standard deployment manifest for the sample application?
Yeah, the architecture of the conformance test or of this sample app kind of violates the architecture that we have for all of the other sample apps, which is for those that have been running Meshery, you understand that you can provision a bunch of different service meshes on them. Once they're provisioned, you can provision a bunch of different sample applications. And we intentionally support provisioning the same sample application on a number of different service meshes to help facilitate learning and an understanding of the behavioral differences between service meshes. And the mesh specific annotations and considerations like that there are individual instances and descriptors of what those are, and it's stored in each of the service mesh adapters. That's exactly why the adapters have been made, is to hold the service mesh specific requirements. And that's where this approach kind of violates that rule. Like nowhere else or generally, mostly nowhere else in Meshry do you see a case statement that says, if Linkerd this, if rather that's the adapter's job. So Michael, as you familiarize, it may be the case that we're able to, the crux of the issue, the reason that architecture went forth here, it was about using Kudo and leveraging. We had considered that it would be, we didn't have to build out the system of assertion, being able to define assertions and then verify them, that we would be able to use this tool Kudo, but in process of using it, we arrived at where we are.
Is it still sort of like?
Well, we could get rid of it. So it's been one of those areas of like,
where you intend to test this using.
So sorry, there was a delay. I didn't realize I think what you were going to ask is like, hey, are we still married to Kudo?
Yes.
And
that was the question.
Yeah. Well, I don't have a ring on at the moment. So here's the thing is do we need Kudo to provision a service mesh for us? No. Do we need Kudo to provision a sample app for us? No. As a matter of fact, it's kind of getting in the way. Okay. Well, what do we need Kudo for? The framework, what its framework provides is this. It lets you define a set of tests in a series that you want to be verified, and you describe those and so okay, so that's helpful. So we can go through and it sort of, its logic is it just follows the sequence that you define, 0.
Yeah. So I was wrong. It's not in Meshkit, it's in here. Yeah.
Oh,
and the deployment I'm referring to is the O2 install. Is it not the which this deploys the sample application, right? And in the case of console, you would have an annotation on one of the deployments, one of the pods, to define the upstream service.
Right. So we haven't bitten off the part of the reason we got to this architecture is because it's like, well, hey, this is a good thing. We should do this. This is helpful, but it's not really, it's like off to the side. We don't want to invest too much. And so that's why it feels slightly off to the side. That's not why it's not like, if we were to do away with Kudo and still support SMI conformance, which at this point, we're committed to, what we would ideally pull in is more of a generic workflow engine, potential to the workflow engine to just basically run the assertions in a serialized and occasionally parallelized, like here, the 0404 sequence. I kind of control that, have the output of whatever that workflow was returned, and then to sort of generate a report off of that. That workflow engine will be leveraged for a lot of other things that we want to do in Meshry, in the project itself. So at some point, it's potentially a worthwhile investment to displace Kudo. In this particular example of the issue that we're facing with service mesh specific annotations, it might be that we're able to use Customize or Helm, or just a bit of service mesh specific Go to overcome that, what I think is the last mile, because I think we're, because I think we're there with Kudo. I know that we're running successfully open service mesh tests, and we're getting results back, and it takes a while. Kudo takes a while, but it's one of those things, like the truest value of it is really to the service mesh maintainers, that they would build this into their pipeline to have Meshry run these tests and validate their conformance ongoing. Because as an SMI maintainer, we'll end up pushing for all of them to do that. To hey, if you want to claim that you're conformant, and you want to carry this logo on your site, you got to be passing these tests. Hence, you should probably come participate in this conversation about what actual tests are going to be run and the manner in which they're run. And so that strong arming is something that we need to go do. And we're all positioned for it. Like, hey, we are the authority at this point. Like, it's fine. Like, it's not we don't have to be sensitive.
No, thank you. I mean, the question is the related, or the, where should we, it was my understanding of how this is set up and works, correct? And B, if we, want to make, say, console adapter running, be able to run these tests, where should we invest the time to, like, get these pod specific annotations into the, the test framework? How can we do it? So the answer would be, yes, we continue to use Kudo for the time being as a good framework, and we would try and have a look at how we can write possibly some Go code somewhere to add these, to customize these deployments.
I think that's about right, because I think we're kind of we're essentially there already. We're sort of essentially. Yeah. The one thing that I guess I'm confused on is the annotation that you need per pod. That annotation will identify the upstream service.
Yes.
And I guess that's something that we know now, since we know the structure of the sample app, right? It's not a run.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you define it when you register your services. You have to define the upstream services, because it's not transparent. So that apparently comes later, or is planned. So like in Istio, you don't have to do it. It's sort of like magic.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Yeah, it is. Cool. I'm really glad that we had that. I know that conversation was probably really boring to a number of folks, but it's pretty important. One thing I'll highlight here is that I've yet to really, we're perpetually running out of time to talk about Get Nighthawk, but it's a new project that we're establishing with a couple of Google engineers and some Red Hat engineers. And so read through the project if you're interested. We're going to get organized on it and start some regular meetings. I'm going to meet with a professor at NITK tomorrow, with a couple of students that are here in the community, and we're going to discuss some pretty interesting things around algorithms. And so the CFP is open for KubeCon EU, which is, it's always bothersome to me that before the current KubeCon is done, that the next CFP is open. It makes, usually I'm trying to finish up slides for the current one. But so Shivai, thank you for pointing that out. I'll put out an open call for anyone that, if anyone wants to co-present, I'm game. Or if you are submitting and you need somebody to help you review it or make some suggestions on what you might talk about, I'm here to help. And so are, it's not like, so are others here in the community. I'll say this, if you would like to co-present on something, I'd love to. Generally expect that you'll work your fingers to the bone on trying to get to what we're going to present, because it will be forward leaning. So who else has got something? Shivai, I cannot wait for those bug fixes on the mega menu.
Yeah, I have made them. So if you want to quickly, I can share my screen and
Please.
show it.
Totally. Yeah. Oh,
Like
man.
it's very small change, so that's why it won't take a lot of time. So give me just 1 second. I'm sharing. So earlier, like I'll quickly just showcase. So earlier we had that sort of a weird issue that we made. So basically what I did was that now the transition that will be made, it won't actually so like let's say now I'm on my home page, and now I come back and I go over here. So it's like now only if you are like scrolling. So I did look at that exact video, Lee, and actually the issue was that with Strappy, how they had implemented was that they had a single div, and they were using JavaScript to actually change the content of the menu itself. So since we have basically embedded CSS within a JavaScript file for the navigation, so I just thought that okay, for now, if you want like since I just wanted to create like a first preview in case this is not looking still not looking good enough, where now like at least you don't have that kind of a weird effect when you're changing from one menu to another. So now it's only like let's say only when you hover over to the actual name, like let's say the actual menu item itself, only then it will open the navbar. And there was also like a small issue with respect to overlapping of the menu itself. So let's say if, earlier actually what was happening was that when you had the two cards, like the cards where you're showing, I thought that at least for the mobile view we don't really need to show it, because actually what was happening was that it was overlapping. So like the content, it was actually overflowing from the card. So I just removed it for now, but again, like in case it needs to be restored and we want to go ahead with some kind of other design, we can go ahead and do that. So like yeah, these were like the update, but like definitely if we want something like the one that Strappy has, but in that case we'll be using JavaScript to actually do that, since it would be like a single div element and it would render the contents based on the menu item that we have. Right now we are using CSS that is embedded in JavaScript.
Well, okay, three points of feedback. One, the mobile view. From my perspective, I think it's fine not to have the graphical, the other, there's just a limited land, space. The other feedback is, if you could, can you take your mouse and go like up to home, and then as you move horizontally right
Okay.
over to projects?
Yeah. This right. This was like one of the bugs that you were mentioning. But actually, again, the thing is that since the I would say, since okay, the hover effect that actually happens now, it's now only limited to this A. So like basically the href, like the A tag, the anchor tag. Earlier, what we were doing was that it was also like part of the li. That is like, since these are all part of the right. So right now, in case you want, like I could probably increase the padding of this to be somewhere like around here, because right now it's only going to be activating the hover effect only on when you are like navigating on top of the icon, like on top of the nav bar element.
I think that would be a small improvement. That might be helpful.
Sure.
Actually,
Alright.
that's good. Actually, what I was going to point out is, if you, from where your cursor is now, if you move horizontally to the right over to projects,
Yeah.
that flicker, do it again if you would, like go back and forth a few times.
So now, like earlier, what was happening? Like if I compare it with the current version of the website, I'll just open Layer 5, Netlify. Give me 1 second. Um, it's acting weird. Just a minute. Oh, sorry. Okay. So currently, like what you're seeing is that in case you're over here, you see that weird flicker, right? That takes place. This was the issue that was there earlier. So now in case like you want to compare with it, so now you have this kind of smooth animation, and once you close it, you so like that is the difference, right? So over here, earlier when you were doing it, it was like it was causing this kind of a weird flicker issue. So now that's gone.
Shoot. Okay, I might have. Can you move over to the projects again, if you would, on the current? Like, yeah, if you just
On
go
the current one, yeah, this one.
horizontally back and forth. So, while we do want for the contents of the menu to be context specific to to that top level menu item,
Yeah.
when you just take your go across the row, all the menu items. Wait, so it only flickered on the issue. Okay, so the thing I'm trying to get to
It will
is
flicker every time. It didn't flicker over here since about didn't have a item, like it didn't have the mega menu.
oh, okay. So anyway, my point is like, hey, we do want for dynamically for the content to change, but if we
Yeah.
could like if their mouse is anywhere in that region, like it should just be up and stay up rather than like um, you know.
So now it's like now in case you close it, only when you hover on top of, so like that is why I just wanted to probably confirm with you that if you want to go ahead with that implementation, was in Strapi they are having JavaScript written in which they're dynamically just changing the content itself. Like so if I go to strapi.io quickly, strapi.io, so if I quickly just go over there, what you would see is that the div element, like the div itself, that is remaining the same. So okay, I'm just waiting for it to load. So the thing that you see over here is that this div element itself is the same, but it's only changing the content dynamically based on the hovering effect. For us it was that we were changing, like it was creating, like you could correlate to it that it was creating a new div element every time you were hovering, because that was being controlled by CSS.
Yeah,
So
let's.
if
Yeah,
yeah,
it's Java. We got to do the JavaScript thing for a couple
okay,
of
all
reasons.
right, yeah,
One is
yeah,
because this is just like you can't. I will shoot myself probably by the end of the year if I have to watch that thing like flicker in and out the whole time as I.
yeah,
And then the second reason is because with CSS only, my hunch is that if we want to, is that we would be lacking a fair bit of dynamicism in terms of what. The freshness of each of the menus, that we
yeah,
would have to basically do a release of the site. We'd have to deploy the site every time that we want to change out those. But with
yeah.
JavaScript, we wouldn't. We would do a GraphQL to, yeah. How is that a difficult thing? Do you expect?
No. I don't think so. It's so difficult. So, but yeah, like the only thing that why I implemented this was that now at least you don't have that kind of a flicker effect once you like go through between menus. So it's like you would see like at least it's a bit more probably you could call it like a bit more smoother in terms of transitioning. That
Yeah.
like what regular effect that you would be having, that in case you lose your focus, it will like it will just go out. So at least now, like this is like the version that I put the pull request for right now.
Nice. Okay. And I
Yeah.
realized, like, by the way, everyone that's on, if this is boring or you're not invested, please don't hang out. It's been a lovely to spend the Friday with you. I'll pause to let people jump off.
Yeah.
Because it's really important that like people that site is quite important because people are going to judge much of the work that people do here by its cover, and by that book, by that book's cover. And so being anal and being extraordinarily meticulous with that. So I have one more thing then for you, Shiva, and that is that the the transition effect that you see on Strappy.io is something of like a roll down. It looked like whereas the one that we're showing, yeah, I mean, like it's an enlargement and a roll down, I think, at the same
Yeah,
time. If I'm getting.
And for us, it's like, okay, yeah. So it's like, it's not like a roll down. Yeah.
You know, theirs feels, there's a certain elegance and beauty to it.
Yeah.
Can you go to stripe.io to humor?
Stripe.
Yeah. I'm sorry, stripe.com. Yeah. Stripe. And I thought that they had an inspiring menu as well, but I don't recall. A few, not nearly as
Not
cool.
really.
Yeah, no, okay. Cool. Okay. I really appreciate you working on that, this Shivai. It's really important when you're done with the JavaScript version. Your instruction for everyone about the way in which what are we calling those highlights?
Highlights as in
like the 2 blog posts that we're showing.
Okay, so I like I haven't really called for like from the internal code, like I've just kept it like nav div, but like yeah, I mean we could call it like highlights for each section.
Okay, yeah. When you're done, then yeah, you'll be in a position to educate us on the controls that we have there. My hope is that those controls are things like are you know, controlled through metadata on the object, like you know, the MDX, like if there's an MDX file and the front matter, it has a certain value, like featured or not, that it would be of a certain type. It would be like a type project featured, true or false, or whatever the.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to, at some point, give a pretty hard press on this site. There's, and as a matter of fact, for those interested, we should probably commit to taking a look at the Google Analytics that have been, the traffic that's been going to the site and where that's been coming from, and just get, you know, to be, I think it would feel good to each of you to see who it is that's checking out your stuff. Oh, speaking of checking out your stuff, I will try to get an email out or something, but a book was published yesterday, and it talks about the landscape. It talks that was shown. So Gerald and Dhruv and many others that have worked on it. That landscape is linked in that book like 3-4 times. Meshery and its architecture, with inclusion of the Meshery operator and some of the patterns that are being worked on. That diagram is included in the book as well. And so is Image Hub. Image Hub is in the book. And so anyway, we'll make sure that we're going to stuff your inboxes with a PDF copy of it at some point when I get my hands on it. But I really I hope that everyone takes it as a point of pride, because there's a lot of people who are going to be looking at your stuff. So yeah, the name of the book, it's the name of the book is long. It is whoops. It is the link I just sent without the 3 O's. It's the second edition of The Enterprise Path to Service Mesh Architectures. And it's the second edition, which if you have an O'Reilly subscription, I think you can go see it now. If you don't, I think in about a week, I would expect, probably timed with KubeCon, maybe Nginx will be hawking it. Any which way, guaranteed, I will probably send everyone a link to it 19 times over the next few months. But
Ali, that link doesn't exist. Like,
yeah, I misspelled books. You'd think if I could author a book, I could. It's the. So. So, and then oh yeah, and then, yeah, you, Vineeth, you might have been saying like, hey, the link on that page, there are links on that page. So there's an open source contributor that created the second edition page on Layer5.io. And at the time, and even now, I don't believe that there is a link to get a copy of the PDF. I don't have one myself. I just have the original, you know. So I think this will take you to like the current version. But yeah, so.
Okay.
Yeah, so I sort of maybe spoke about this slightly prematurely. I'm just excited that I would hope that you guys are excited. So cool. All right. Hey, we're very much over time. Anybody have anything else? Well, hey, please do anticipate with KubeCon next week. We might end up canceling one or two of the meetings. We'll try to do that today based on who's going to be available. But it's just it's a super busy week. It's always busy. Cool. Thank you all. Happy Diwali. See you guys next time. See you, Michael.
See you. Bye-bye.